I'm sure you have seen real estate ads where real estate agents are bragging about selling a property. The real question is, did this agent actually sell the property? So let's look at the typical actors in a real estate transaction. You have the seller who owns the property. You have the listing agent who is representing the seller. You have the buyer's agent who is representing the buyer, and you have the buyer. Obviously, the buyer did not sell the property because they bought it. The seller sold the property, therefore they can say they have sold the property. Did the buyer's agent sell the property? The question now becomes, is that agent representing the buyer or is that agent representing the seller? If they say they have sold the property, then who did they sell it to? Their buyer? So now they have represented the seller. Actually, it's just for marketing purposes that a buyer's agent can actually say they have sold the property. In effect, they have not sold the property. The listing agent, on the other hand, has been acting as a facilitator and a representative for the seller. Can they say they have sold the property? The reality is the seller is the one making the decision whether the property is going to be sold and for what price and for what terms. So really the listing agent is just taking credit for the sale, but actually they have not sold the property. Now here's what some people might ask. If there is no buyer's agent on the other side, and there is only one agent involved, meaning that there's the seller, the listing agent, and a buyer comes directly to the listing agent to try to buy the property directly from the seller through that listing agent. Did the listing agent actually sell the property to the buyer? Well, again, ultimately, the negotiation is between the buyer and the seller. Whether the real estate agent was convincing enough to sway the buyer in that direction, whether it's a higher price or better terms for the seller, there is always that possibility. Do they have sales skills? Absolutely, it takes sales skills, but they still have not sold the property because ultimately it's between the buyer and the seller to reach an agreement, and when the seller says yes, this is when the property sells. I discuss in another video what actually real estate agents do, but for now just remember, where an agent is bragging or taking credit for the sale of a property, all they're telling you is they were involved in a transaction where the buyer and the seller finally agreed on the terms and the price for the transaction. They didn't actually sell the property unless they really had a power of attorney from the seller where they could freely decide on the price and the terms of the property. And that seldom happens in the marketplace.